Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternities, ranking all the episodes of Season 1 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. In this video, I rank all the episodes of Deep Space Nine from my least favorite, or Deep Space Nine Season 1, not doing the whole show, Season 1, from my least favorite to my favorite. So yeah, obviously this is the first one that I'm doing for Deep Space Nine, so I have nothing to compare it to as far as Deep Space Nine goes, not yet, but I am pretty dang sure that this is going to be my least favorite season of the show. In fact, it is my least favorite season of the show. We'll see if the numbers reflect that. But as I said, I'm pretty dang sure that they will reflect that. So, let's see. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 episodes that get a negative rating this season. 8 out of 19. So that means 11 episodes get a positive rating. Now, any rating I give between 1 and 5 is considered negative, and between 6 and 10 is considered positive. So yeah, that's 8 and 11. Not the best ratio, but certainly not the worst. Now, I averaged out the scores of all the episodes, and so the average rating that I have for season 1 is a 5.6, which isn't too surprising. It's technically a negative rating there, but just barely. But still, I'm not too surprised about that, considering I didn't think season 1 was a particularly good season. Now, that being said, so here's the thing. A lot of people say that the first 2 seasons of Deep Space Nine weren't that good. Now, I actually think that only applies to season 1. And it's funny, I've heard some wrong people who are objectively, incredibly, and ridiculously wrong tell people that they should start Deep Space Nine at season 4. That the show doesn't start watching it, Worf comes in. Those people are stupid. Do not listen to them under any circumstances. If anything, you can start Deep Space Nine and at the end of last episode of season 2 and start with a Dominion War. Why would you skip season 3? That seems like the most nonsensical thing ever. I guess they're implying that the first 3 seasons aren't that good, and that is totally wrong. So, my favorite season of Deep Space Nine is season 3. I think that's the best season. Why would you skip over the best season? I love season 3 of DS9 for similar reasons that I love season 3 of TNG. For one thing, that's when the show got really good. And for the second thing, the season is just good on average. Like, it doesn't have as many amazing episodes, but it has a lot of good episodes. Now, unlike season 3 of TNG, there are some negative rated episodes in season 3 of DS9, but I'll get to that when I get to season 3. Point is, season 3 is my favorite season. Season 6 would be my second favorite. Probably season 7 would be my third favorite, and season 4 would be my fourth favorite. Once I watch them, I'll judge it, see if I want to swap that around. But then season 2 would be my fifth favorite, and season 5 would be my second to least favorite, and season 1 would be my least favorite. Now, I'm pretty sure I won't change that around. I've been watching a lot of reaction videos to season 5 recently, and I really do think season 5 was a huge downgrade, and it's amazing to me that some people think it's one of the best seasons of the show, where I think season 2 was even better than season 5. I think season 2 got really better, but I'm here to talk about season 1, which I will agree with everyone was definitely the worst season of Deep Space Nine. But that being said, some people like to compare season 1 of Deep Space Nine to season 1 of TNG, or even season 2 of TNG, and I would say that this season is nowhere near as bad as the first 2 seasons of TNG, or the first 2 seasons of Enterprise for that matter, but yeah. But, so just for comparison, in season 1 of TNG, there were 25 episodes. I gave 10 a positive rating and 15 a negative rating, which is by far the worst ratio. Season 2, not as bad as the ratio because it had 11 good, 11 positive, 11 negative, so it's half and half. So Deep Space Nine Season 1 beats that out because it's more than half, it's 11 to 8. And also, I average scores for Season 1 and 2 of TNG. Season 1 was 4.75. Season 2 was 4.86. So, Deep Space Nine Season 1, with its 5.6, beats out both those seasons, which makes sense. Because I do think... And it's funny because I was reading several people on comments from people online, who started, I don't like Deep Space Nine. I started and I thought it was boring and I didn't like any of the characters. And people were like, did you watch past season 1? And they would be like, no, I don't want to have to watch a show for a whole couple seasons until the show gets good. That's ridiculous. I'm like, you fucking watched Next Generation. If you're able to make it through the first 2 seasons of Next Generation, you can make it through the first season of Deep Space Nine. Anyway, sorry, but those people irritate me. Oh, I don't like Deep Space Nine. Watch it beyond season 1, maybe, before you actually say that. But anyway, 5.6 average rating for DS9 Season 1, which is better than Season 1 and 2 TNG, but obviously not as good as any of the later seasons of TNG, as, Season 3 had a 7.8, Season 4 had a 6.76, Season 5 had a 6.04, and Season 6, which I just covered, has a 6.6. So all better than this measly 5.6. But I'm sure that the later seasons of Deep Space Nine will fare a lot better. So, I don't know. There wasn't like a clear cut of, the start of the season sucked, but it got better later on. In the middle dipped. The good and bad episodes are kind of mixed in everywhere. There was a DS9's Trilogy of Terror. That is 3 terrible episodes in a row, which I'm going to get to right away because they're all at the bottom of my list. So that was 3 consecutive terrible episodes. But outside of that, it's pretty sprinkled in here and there where the good or mediocre and bad episodes are. So anyway, let's jump into... So this DS9 Season 1... all 10 ratings are represented in this ranking, even though it's only 19 episodes. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all of them, all the ratings are in here. So it's pretty evenly spread throughout the season. So that is interesting. So anyway, how it works is a number will pop up on the screen saying what the rating is. And so the episodes I'm about to talk to will have that rating 1 through 10. And we'll go right that throughout the whole 19 episodes. So let's go ahead and get started. No, she's making biscuits. She's making biscuits. Isn't that so cute? Make your biscuits, Lillian. Anyway, sorry, you get distracted by my cats. Anyway, so let's go ahead and she's still doing it. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started with number 19, least favorite episode of season 1, the one rated episode that we get this season, and that is If Wishes Were Horses. This is the second episode in the Trilogy of Terror, or DS9's Trilogy of Terror. I should distinguish it from Voyager's Trilogy of Terror, the real one, not the fake one that people talk about. But anyway, this is DS9's Trilogy of Terror, and the worst episode in that bunch, and the worst episode of the season, one of the worst of the entire show. In fact, it was number 14 worst in the entire franchise, according to me. And that is If Wishes Were Horses. This is the episode that should get all of the hate that Move Along Home gets. And I will talk about that episode much later because it's actually good. Where I don't understand why people hate that episode, not this one. Well, some people I could hear them saying, well, I hate both of them. Yeah, but this one's much worse. It's tries to be like TNG, which is the downfall of season 1 of DS9, but more specifically copies episodes like Where No One Has Gone Before and Shore Leave, and not as good, and the rules are inconsistent. It doesn't make any sense. It's goofy, with having a baseball player follow Jake around and Rumpelstiltskin following Chief O'Brien around, who was supposed to be a leprechaun. Until Colm Meaney said he absolutely refused to do it, and so they had to rewrite it. Oh, that's hilarious. But yeah, so, and the big thread of the week where they have like 10 minutes straight of technobabble turns out to be, oh, just imagine it away, and it will go away. I'm sorry, that's a much worse ending than It's Only a Game. Much worse. But anyway, this episode's a dumpster fire in an outhouse. I don't know what a dumpster's doing in an outhouse, but it's in there and covered in shit. That is this episode. Anyway. Alright, so next, we're getting to my number 18. This is the third episode in the trilogy, or DS9's trilogy of terror, and that is The Forsaken, an episode for some reason people were like, oh, I think this is a good Loxana Troy episode. She has that scene with Odo in the elevator. Yeah, one good scene that lasts for like 2 minutes, and the rest of the episode's absolute garbage. Like, it's Loxana Troy chasing a man around, trying to force herself on him when he's very obviously not interested in her. So basically, this is Manhunt all over again. Great. And just because it's Odo, it's supposed to be cute and funny. It's creepy and annoying, and she needs to get a restraining order against her. I'm sorry, you should get a restraining... Like, this is... why is it funny that someone's trying to force themselves on someone else? It's not funny, and this character fucking annoying, and I can't stand her. And... on top of that, we get a technobabble B plot, or C plot, I should say, or maybe it's the B plot. We'll call it the B plot. That's useless, about some pup attaching itself to the station, a probe that they call pup because it acts like a puppy. Nobody cares about it. It's just some technobabble nonsense. And then the C plot is even worse than the A plot, with Bashir having to look after these ambassadors that are so cartoonish caricatures over the top. They're probably plucked right out of Scooby-Doo, and they act completely nonsensical and unrealistic and totally annoying for the sake of being annoying. And Cisco's a dick and gets pleasure out of torturing Bashir by putting him with these annoying ambassadors. And then at the end, they're like, just because Bashir shoves them into a Jeffrey tube when they're about to be consumed by fire. Like, oh, I like this young man. He saved my life. I'm going to put him up for accommodation. Which is nonsense. It's so ridiculous. It's so stupid. This episode is terrible. So we complete DS9's trilogy of terror with my number 17, Progress. Now, I know this is going to ruffle some feathers because some people really, really like this episode. I've heard people call this the second best episode of Season 1. Needless to say, I disagree. I think this character is completely unlikable, the one of Mullibok, who's the main character. He's supposed to be sympathetic, yet the writer said he was written as a con man. So why do we care what happens to him? Why doesn't Kira just beam him up when he refuses to leave? I get the whole thing about her not wanting to be like the Cardassians and not trying, but the Cardassians would simply kill him. You're actually going to give him a nice cushy home on Bajor, so you're nothing like the Cardassians. So it's that kind of storyline falls apart. But I do like the scene with her and Sisko, where Sisko says for the first time, "I like you, I want you back as my first officer." That's a nice scene. But again, one good scene, a good episode does not make. Or however you say that. But anyway, no. Just because it has one good scene doesn't mean it's not a terrible episode. It is a terrible episode because most of it is incredibly boring. And it's annoying. It has this annoying get off my screen character who's like, I don't want to leave. Let me tell you a story about my things when I drive the van and there's a big tree. Shut up. Who cares? Don't care. Beam him out of there and get the fuck out of here and let's end this episode. Anyway. So next we get to my number 14, which is A Man Alone. Now, funny thing is, I used to have this as the second least favorite episode of season 1, and this was, I believe, in my top 10 worst DS9. But I kind of changed my mind about this one after watching it again. I still think that the main storyline with Odo being accused of murder was dumb, and it's a cliche, the wrongfully accused cliche that we've seen a billion times before, and of course he's innocent. And then the crowd in DS9 acts like a mob from The Simpsons, where someone in the crowd yells, "Won't someone think of the children?" And he brings us love, get him! And it's so goofy and stupid. But that being said, the reason why I upped my rating from like a 1 to a 3 is because the other storylines actually aren't that bad. There's a lot of place setting, a lot of early character buildings. We see Jake and Nog meet each other for the first time. Keiko decides to build a school and be the teacher, and Sisko wrestles with meeting befriending Jadzia after being friends with Curzon, and how weird that is for him. Like, some good character stuff in there. It's just the A plot was, it had the Scooby-Doo ending. You're actually him! So goddamn. Simpsons mob, Scooby-Doo ending. That A plot was terrible, but the other plots are actually somewhat interesting. Alright, so next we'll get into my number 15, which is You Must Obey Your Negus! Sorry, I just love saying that. The Negus. The introduction to the Ferengi episodes. Oh boy, thank God for that. Anyway, I mean, it's not that bad in the scheme of things. It's not the worst Ferengi episode out there, but it's I don't get why people think they're funny, especially the Grand Negus. I mean, he's just, look at how gritty he is. Ha ha ha. Okay. Yeah, and I mean, Morn refuses to leave the bar when they had the Ferengi meeting. That was funny. So it did have its funny moments. And they haven't found Ram's character yet because he will completely be retconned later on, but for the good. So not that I'm saying that's a bad thing. And Negus Zek has a son that will disappear after I think Q snaps him out of existence or something. I don't know. Anyway, so next we'll get into my number 14, which is The Passenger. I'm not going to sing the whole song this time, or at least the whole verse. I learned my lesson from that. But anyway, The Passenger, which features the worst performance, or one of the worst performances from a main cast member in Star Trek, at least definitely in Deep Space Nine. That's saying a lot because Avery Brooks is on this show, but yeah, that performance that Alexander Siddig gives at the end of the episode where he's taken over by an alien is just like, what in the fuck are you doing? Like, the director seriously should have stepped in and be like, what is that you're doing with your voice? Don't do that. Like, he should have stepped in and said that. Like, it was absolutely terrible. I think you will try to get your doctor back. Like, what the hell even was that? Like, I can hear, when I tried to ignore the terrible acting and listen to the lines, it's actually written well. Like, if you had a good performance, this actually could have been kind of good. But, so back in the day, I used to have this in my top 5 worst DS9 episodes, mainly because of that performance. But when I went back and watched it, I was like, yeah, the rest of the episode's not that bad. I mean, Quark is an accessory to murder, and he gets away with it. I mean, that's kind of messed up. But, I mean, they just go and kill, they flat out murder whole people on the ship, and Quark arranged it, and he gets away with it. I think this is the worst thing Quark ever done. It's worse than what he did in Vortex by setting up the robbery that went wrong and ended up in a death. And it's worse than what he does in Invasive Procedure when he helps the Klingons invade the station and almost costs Jadzia her life. Because in that case, at least no one died, where in this case, freaking a whole bunch of people died, and he was directly responsible. But anyway, sorry, that's neither here nor there. As I said, the episode is like somewhat interesting about this, alien detective trying to find out who the thing is. So it's not the worst episode ever. I put it upward a bit, but still not a good episode. So next, we will get to my number 13, which is Q-less. I've heard a lot of people say this is one of the worst episodes of the show, the worst episode of the season. I gave it a 5, so obviously I don't think it's that bad. It's not good, though, but it's not that bad. I think there are worse episodes in DS9. Is it the best use of Q? No. Did Q belong on DS9 at all? No. Was it just a cheap shot to try to get viewers to come by having a TNG character on board? Yes. But Vosh fit in, at least. Like, she fit right in with Quark, and her whole plot was selling shit at an auction worked. I mean, and the follow-up to her being with Q worked, even though it should have been on TNG, but it still worked. And the whole thing with the alien wanting to go home and dragging the station with it, whatever. I mean, it's whatever for me. It's fine. Anyway, next we'll get to my number 12, which is Past Prologue. Some people really like this episode. I do not. I just find it really syndicated and really kind of cheesy. I mean, it introduces Garrick, who refers to himself as plain simple Garrick in this episode, which is good. Introduced the best character of this show. All good, although he's not all that interesting in this episode, but he does haggle, which is kind of funny. And he totally hits on Bashir, and it kind of sucked that they had to change that. But other than Garrick, this episode is just kind of cheesy, like the stuff with the Komach and Kira's old terrorist buddy. Realize that they never mention him ever again and wipe him from existence. Yeah, there's a reason for that, because he's not an interesting character, and that whole situation they set up with the Komach was not very interesting either. So there's a reason why they never reference this again, because it's not good. And yeah, it's talking about TNG characters shoehorned into the show, Lorson Bator being there, blah blah blah. It's it's whatever. Alright, so next we will get to my number 11, which is Babel, or however you want to say it. I've heard some people trash this episode too, thinking it's one of the worst things ever. It's fine. As you know, it is the whole virus cliche, and people have word salad, so whoop-de-doo. Other than the fact we get some amazing overacting from Avery Brooks. Turn the knob this way forward! Like, that makes too much sense to be something he would say with the word salad. But, you get the idea. He did over-exaggerate. But anywho, and Odo has to take charge of the station, and Quark comes on board and is like, where's my hazard pay? And and all that kind of thing. So it was fine. And Kira just like flat out kidnaps a dude and gets breathes right in his face when she has a deadly virus that she knows is airborne. Like, oh, you're not going to help us? There you go. Wear your mask, Kira. God damn it. Social distancing. Anyway, so it was I thought it was kind of enjoyable. It's fine. Anyway, so we'll now get to my number 10, which is Dax. Yes, it's the wrongfully accused cliche yet this time it's the added cliche of being a wrongfully accused trial episode, which turns out to just be one giant excuse to dump exposition on the Trill, which they are totally retconning from TNG, so they should have just called them a totally different alien. But, that's kind of another topic. But, as kind of mediocre and boring this episode is, it features some good guest actors. So that elevates it from a 5 to a 6. It's got that one dude who played President Logan in 24. He was really good. And then the woman from Lost who played Eloise Hawkins. And then another woman who was in The Survivors. She was also the lawyer or the secretary in Liar Liar. So yeah, you got 3 good guest actors. Kind of fun to watch that. Because Jadzia, you have to prove your innocence, not because you want to, but because you're supposed to. Sorry. Anyway, so we'll get to my number 9, which is Move Along Home. Yes, I'm putting this at my number 9. Fight me, I'll fight you on it. Come on, let's fight. Now, actually, I know you're just going to tell me I'm wrong and move on with your life, which is fair enough, but I'm not wrong. This episode's actually not that bad. I don't understand why everyone hates it. Because it's only a game. Sorry. I think I get a kick out of this episode, and it's not in a so bad it's good manner, because I don't think it's that bad. I just think it's funny the way it's silly. You have Quark going, please, and of course the classic line of Odo saying, I'm not in Starfleet. I didn't do it too exaggerated that time. But anyway, and yeah, a lot of cool, funny moments. And I think the games are dumb and they're silly and they don't actually make sense as games, but who cares? It's not the point of the story. I'm fine with it. I think it's fun. I think it makes sense. The only thing I don't like about this episode, that I really don't like about this episode, is the ending where it does that goofy coda thing where Quark is like, I want to buy these games. It could work here. Follow, Mr. Follow. And Kira just has this like, can you believe that? Like, that was sitcom-ish bullshit. But other than that, like, kind of liked it. Alma Rain, count to 4. Sorry, I'll stop. Anyway, next we'll get to my number 8, which is Vortex. This episode's okay. It's kind of not as interesting in retrospect because Odo's all like, where am I from? But now we know where he's from, so it's kind of like, yeah, not as interesting anymore. But I do like the twist, though, that we get this, Odo has to go on this adventure with this kind of shady criminal type, but it turns out that he's just a father trying to protect his daughter from a fascist regime, and so Odo is willing to stick up with him, for him, and tell everyone else that he's dead, so they're gonna pretend that they're dead anyway. But yeah, the problem with this episode is the Miradorn villains of the week are forgettable. Nobody cares about them. They're just there to create attention or whatever, and all the characters were just kind of shoved at you very fast and weren't giving a proper introduction, which kind of annoys me. But yeah, other than that, it's fine. It's a fun, decent episode. Anyway, so next we will get into my number 7, which is The Storyteller. Now wait. I know you're going to be like, what? You have The Storyteller all the way up to your number 7? Let me explain. Just give me a second to explain. It's because of the B plot. If we were just doing the O'Brien stuff with once upon a time, there was a Dal'Rok, and there it is. Like, if we were just doing that storyline, then this would probably get a 4, maybe a 3. But the B plot's actually good. It's the one with Jake and Nog, and there's this visiting Bajoran leader who's their age, a tetrarch, whatever, and Nog crushes out hard on her, and so they have to like try to hit on her, and she takes advantage of them to get to know Sisko's son better, but they actually end up forming a bond, and they do this prank where they throw oatmeal on Jake and tell him it's Odo and stuff like that. So I actually really like that B plot. So it is the strength of the B plot that gets a 6. If it had a better A plot, this episode would probably get a 7, but the A plot drags it down a little bit. But the A plot, to be fair, is not the worst thing in the world either, because it has its funny moments, and it's the first episode we get with O'Brien and Bashir bonding, so that's a good thing. And I love that whole thing about Dr. Bashir forcing him to call him Julian. And then when Julian was like giving O'Brien shit for being the Sarah, he was like, "I'm glad you're enjoying yourself, Julian." Like, there's some enjoyment to be had, even though it's overall a silly and dumb plot. But yeah, I forgot to mention the B plot in the Nagus with Jake teaching Nog to read, and how much that sucked because it was just like an after school special. This is way better. This is a much better B plot. And it's also better than the one in Progress, which by the way was the better storyline as well in that episode, where they're doing the whole J-Nog consortium and selling one thing for another. But this one's definitely better than those. Alright, so next we'll get to my one and only episode that I gave a 7 this season, which is weird because usually 7 is the number that has the most episodes attached to it. But only one this time, and that is my number 6, which is Dramatis Personae. Yeah, this episode was fine. It was kind of fun seeing the crew play out this mutiny. And of course, oh my god, the best thing about it is Avery Brooks is overacting. Oh my god, it's so amazing. "Give me a phaser, I'll take care of Kara." And the whole, "What is it? A clock!" I gotta give this episode a 7 for that alone. But, this is also a good Odo episode because he's the only one not affected by it, and so he has to figure it out and sort of manipulate the doctor to cure everyone, which was kind of cool. I think the whole mutiny storyline kind of loses its teeth because it's supposed to be the big conflict between Starfleet and Bajoran officers, but they're all under telepathic mind control anyway, so it doesn't really have any consequences or make any difference. So, but, it's a fun episode. Alright, so now getting into my top 5, and I'm only up to 8 rated episodes, so it's not that great of a season, but now we're getting into the good stuff. My number 5, which is the series premiere, Emissary. This would get a much higher rating if it was just the A-plot. But even so, like, the A-plot wasn't quite as good as I remember it being. It does drag at times as well. But it was a really good character story for Sisko. Like, starting out with the death of his wife and his resentment towards Picard and his I don't want to be here. And then going on this quest, being sent by Kaiopaka and discovering the wormhole and sort of going into meeting the wormhole aliens, and he tells them, basically spouting off all what the Starfleet and Federation is all about. In fact, fun fact, this I think was the only episode where, or the first one at least, where someone actually describes what the Federation is in plain terms. He says it's a collection of organization of planets that used for trade and military exchange and whatever he said, defensive purposes or whatever. But anyway, so he basically espouses the principles of what Star Trek is all about. But at the same time, he is thrown back into this character story because he's in this nonlinear space and not realizing that his thoughts are sending him to the death of his wife over and over again. And he's like, why you keep sending me here? And they're like, we don't send you here, you send us here. And then he has to admit that he does see her like this every time he closes his eyes in the blink of an eye. And it was it was actually a surprisingly really good performance from Avery Brooks and a really powerful moment. But the problem is we get the B-plot where they have a lot of clunky exposition. They're just throwing shit out. Oh, I don't know where I come from or whatever. And just throw out all this exposition very clunkily. And then the Cardassians attack the station. And it doesn't make any sense why Starfleet wouldn't arm the station, at least just a little bit. I mean, come on. But yeah, no, it wasn't interesting. That A-plot does make it really strong, so it's still it's definitely a good way to start the show, I will say. Anyway, so next we'll get into my number 4, which is In the Hands of the Prophets. So going from the first episode of the season straight to the last episode of the season, it was a pretty strong finale. Not the best in the world, but it introduces the Bajoran. It dives deeper into the strife in the Bajoran culture, which was only kind of hinted at earlier in the season. And it was kind of meant to be a kind of bookend to Emissary. And I think it does a good job at that. They introduced the despicable Vedic Win, which makes total sense that a character like this would exist, who's an extremist and just uses religion in order to gain power, because there's a lot of real-life examples throughout history and in current day to fit that description. So it makes perfect sense, and Sisko tries to make an ally with the more progressive, more understandable Vedic, but then she tries to assassinate him. And it turns out this whole thing was just a trick to try to assassinate him. And so she uses a member of O'Brien's staff turns out to be one of the brainwashed people in Vedic Win's cult. So, it's an interesting murder mystery. I don't think it's amazing. I think there are some people who like this episode more than I do. But, it was definitely a powerful episode, and the whole Sisko giving a speech about, I'm neither the evil or the devil. Like, that was all good stuff, too. And, yeah, of course, you had the whole creationism versus evolution analogy there with the school. That was pretty good commentary as well. So, anyway, we will now get into my number 3, which is Battle Lines. And yeah, I do like this episode better than In the Hands of the Prophets. I think this episode's underappreciated. It's got Jonathan Banks, a.k.a. Mike from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Does a pretty good job in this episode. I think it gives a really good performance. And I think this is a very good commentary on the perpetual war, on how this and I'm sure there's a lot of real life examples of this as well, where you have two factions who hate each other, two clans that despise each other, and they've been at war for so many centuries. They can't even remember why. It's perpetual, and they keep it going for the sake of keeping it going. And you add in that interesting sci-fi twist where they're brought back to life and they can't die unless they leave the moon, then they will die, so which traps Kaiopaka there. Acting Nana Visitor wasn't the best in this episode, but it was interesting. I did like the dilemma that they were faced with here. So yeah, I think this is a really good underrated episode. Alright, so next we will get into my number 2, the only 9 rated episode this season, and that is Captive Pursuit. I think this is another episode that's underrated. A lot of people used to love this more, I think, when it first came out, but maybe it didn't age as well compared to the rest of the show, but I still really like it. I think it's a great character story for O'Brien. Brian, as he has to meet Tusk and sort of befriends him, and then is willing to risk his career over him to help him out. And it was an interesting concept based off of the least dangerous game. The most dangerous game, where he's being hunted by these hunters. That's what their whole culture is like. That he was bred and made for the purpose of being hunted. And and he's going to go back in disgrace because he allowed himself to be captured. Now, there was some plot contrivance with the fact that he had this vow of silence, which he broke immediately once the hunters showed up, so why have it in the first place? But, you look past that, and it's one of those episodes where, the plot could have been avoided if they simply just talked and told each other stuff. But it was still really good character story with O'Brien, and interesting species from the Gamma Quadrant with a twist, and I do love that. Did something that later seasons did kind of lose, having that sort of weird twist from the Gamma Quadrant as frequently. So yeah, it's an early episode I think really worked, and I really appreciate it. So next, we'll get into my number 1 favorite season of Deep Space Nine Season 1, or favorite episode. Favorite episode of Deep Space Nine Season 1, and it's not even close. This could have gotten higher than a 10, but I told myself never to cop out. But it is one of the best episodes of the entire franchise, so it seems out of place being in such a bad season as Season 1. But here it is, and that is, of course, Duet. It's just an amazing episode that handles prejudice, bigotry, and preconceptions, and also the trauma of surviving a Holocaust and having to deal with those that are responsible for it. But yeah, it's presented in the way of a very effective mystery, in my opinion. And also, what I love most about it, one of the things I love most about it, is that it's mostly just dialogue. It's a bottle show, so it's mostly just two people in the room talking, and yet it manages to be extremely thrilling and captivating. And for me, I find that one of the most impressive things that film and television can do. You'll often hear this cliche that that the visual medium, like movie and television, is supposed to be, you're supposed to be visual. It's supposed to be visual. You're not supposed to have too much dialogue. You're supposed to show, not tell. But I think when taken to an extreme, that doesn't work. I think being able to have excessive dialogue and still make it compelling without relying too much on fancy camera tricks or scenery or special effects or stuff like that. To me, that is way more difficult and much more impressive when you can just have dialogue and yet have it be absolutely captivating. There's two people in the room talking, and yet I cannot think of an episode that's more captivating than this one. Just the sparring, the back and forth between Maritza and Kira, and how there's layers, because at first Maritza's pretending to be Goldar Hill, pretending to be Maritza, but then they find out it's Goldar Hill, so then it's just Maritza pretending to be Goldar Hill, but then they finally find out it's really Maritza, so now you see his true self finally at the end, and he's riddled with guilt for having to live through the Holocaust, and that he used to cover his ears and cry because he had to listen to the atrocities that were committed, so he wants to sacrifice his life to make up for it because he is so riddled with guilt. And then Kira, I'm almost tearing up just talking about it. Kira recognizes, first of all, her own bias, her own prejudice, because the episode begins with her wanting him to be guilty. She said, I want him to be guilty. But then she got what she wanted, and it was tearing her up inside. And I realized, be careful what you wish for. But then she realized, no, she actually didn't want him to be guilty. He is a good man, and that she actually needs to stick up with him, for him, regardless of his race. And manages to set her prejudices aside, and it was so well earned. It was such a thrill ride. So the acting was amazing, the music was amazing, the script was amazing. Like, everything about it just was like top notch Star Trek at its best. Very easily, extremely easy. Like, it's nowhere near close. My number one favorite episode of season 1 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So that is it for my ranking all the episodes of Deep Space Nine season 1. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to leave a like. Leave a comment below. Tell me how wrong I am for liking Move Along Home. How would you rank the episodes of season 1? And how awesome is Duet? Is it not awesome? But yeah, so also, if you really would like to support the channel, if you can support me on Patreon. There'll be a link in the description below. There's different tiers for different people. There's different rewards. I do a revisited series. I did a super long 1.5-hour deep dive into Duet, where I actually watched the episode, and you can watch it along with me. That'll be over on Patreon. I would highly recommend checking that out. And I also do a lot of other Patreon only videos where I revisit reviews that I've already did, and pre-releases. You can request videos, stuff like that. And also make comments on my episode reviews, so I'll read your comment out in my review. So many different things you can check out if you really want to support the channel. But if you're unable to, that's fine. You can, again, leave a like, subscribe. All those things help me out. So we'll see what's coming up next on my channel. Thursday, I'll be releasing one of those Patreon exclusive revisited videos public for everyone to see on my channel. I'll be releasing one I did about a year ago, Q Who Revisited. It's an episode I think is highly overrated, so I explain why in very detail in that video. And then on Saturday, I'll be starting season 7 of TNG with my review for Liaisons. And then on Monday, back to DS9, this time over on Patreon for Revisited, this time revisiting my review for the Circle trilogy, all 3 episodes, the 3-parter that started season 2 of DS9. And then on Wednesday, I'll be back on my public channel, back to TNG for my review for Interface. So that is what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Next Generation and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.